talk about today. Got a lot of really exciting stuff to kind of go over with the healthcare panel. So want to thank everyone for being here, and certainly want to extend a big thank you to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming for being our presenting sponsor today. So thank you guys very much. So while we're going through and speaking today, on the tabletop, there's a little QR code right in the middle. That's the poll. Instead of being up on the screen today, it's just going to scan that QR code with your smartphone, and you guys can be active on that poll the whole luncheon. So please take a few minutes to do that. So I would like to welcome up Diane Gore with Blue Cross Blue Shield to the stage. And the First Lady, please come on up.
Thank you. At Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming, we are dedicated to promoting the health and wellness in our communities across the state. And one of the ways in which we do that is to help combat food insecurity, because food insecurity really can be a key component in an individual's health. We started partnering with Wyoming Hunger Initiative shortly at the beginning of COVID, and we've expanded our partnership since then. And now for the second year, we're utilizing our sponsorship of the University of Wyoming football game tomorrow to also highlight food insecurity, and partnering with Wyoming Hunger Initiative to do that. And our theme for the event, as you can see if you've looked at any of the information on your table, is aptly named Tackle Hunger.
Well, thank you, Diane. You know, this partnership is in its second year, and we're so excited. That's what partnerships make everything work in this state. The Hunger Initiative is so proud to be able to do our statewide food drive. And you can come, if you're coming to the game, you can buy food bags on site at Ridley's, and they'll all be donated to the local pantries in their communities.
We're really excited about it. We've had food drives going on in our offices throughout the state over the last month. Also, Ridley's family food markets have had the food drives going on in all of the Ridley's across the state, and they've been a great partner in this as well. There's another QR code on the table. If you aren't able to make the game tomorrow, you can donate to Wyoming Hunger Initiative through the QR code. And we're also making it easy for you to donate tomorrow by having those Ridley's prepackaged food bags that you can buy in the indoor practice facility. And there will also be donation bins in the indoor practice facility and at gate 6.
Last year, we did about 4,000 meals. So we'd love to top that. Our goal is 10,000. And we think it's doable with your help and those around the state.
I think we might have our little highlight video to show.
Wyoming Hunger Initiative and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming have come together once again to tackle hunger in Wyoming. We will be collecting non-perishable food items at the September 3rd University of Wyoming Cowboys football game against the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. For every pound of food donated during the game, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming will donate $1 to the Wyoming Hunger Initiative. Let's gear up for game day, Wyoming, and tackle hunger. Go Pokes!
Well, thank you both for that. We'd love to help you guys get to 10,000 meals. So let's all come together as a community and let's make that happen. I also like to extend a very special thank you to our bronze sponsors for today. And we have Affordable Roofing, Taco John's, Swan Ranch, iHeartMedia, Appaloosa Broadcasting. Thank you, guys. And obviously, with all of our sponsors, we couldn't do it without you. So it's very important that you guys open up your hearts and your pocketbooks for the chamber. So thank you guys very much. Now, please welcome Vicki Pyle, Doretta Wellness Advocate, and the Red Carpet Committee to come forward and introduce our new members.
Hello. Who are those people in red? We are the Red Carpet Committee. We roll out the red carpet to welcome new partners to the Chamber of Commerce. In addition to introducing new members at luncheons, we host ribbon cuttings to learn about to learn about and welcome those members in their own space. We also represent beautification awards a couple of times a year and assist at chamber luncheons. If you'd like to become a member of our committee, we're the funnest committee, I'm just gonna say. See Mary Jane or one of us to learn more about us. So today I'd like to introduce our new partners. I am going to start with Top Flight Maintenance. Top Flight Maintenance, our owner is Brian Clymer. Come on up, Brian. Thank you. Cheyenne, he has a co-owner, Tony Rizzuto is a co-owner, but he's not able to join us today. As a Cheyenne native, Bob Rizzuto originally founded Top Flight Maintenance in 1997 as a family business, specializing mainly in lawn and landscape. Bob's sons, Tony and Buddy, joined the business, and together they expanded the scope of work, included janitorial services, snow removal, window washing, and small maintenance projects for businesses in Cheyenne. In 2015, Patrick Formby purchased Top Flight, which he operated until mid-2022, when Brian Clymer and Tony Rizzuto purchased the business back. With their knowledge and hands-on experience of business operations to further service their customers and employees in southern Wyoming and northern Colorado. Thank you. Next, we have Andrew and Judith Medina, owners of Wyoming Management. Wyoming Management offers a multitude of services, including bookkeeping, faculty maintenance, and tenant relationship services. Andrew Medina, a Cheyenne native, and his wife Judith are very excited for the opportunity to continue working with and for the Cheyenne business community. Wyoming Management, in concert with Andrew and Judith's other family-owned and operated business, Wyoming Facility Cleaning, offer a wide variety of services to keep your business and property looking good and running smoothly. Darity Darden is the owner of EXP Realty LLC. She is here today along with her daughter, Dallas Bacon. Darity is a real estate agent with EXP Realty LLC in Cheyenne and the nearby area, providing homeowners and sellers with professional, responsive, and attentive real estate services. Recently, Darity was recognized by HomeSnap as an official winner of the Top 25 award for the first half of 2022. Darity and her husband, Jim, have been longtime residents of Pine Bluffs. She volunteers her time throughout the community, including the Fellowship of Christian Athletes Task Force, and is looking forward to expanding her commitment through the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you. Next, we have Laura Brown. Laura Brown is owner, along with her husband, Chris Brown, of Pinewood Village Apartments. We're excited to present a new and improved Pinewood Village Apartments with 199 apartments. We are providing housing for hardworking people in Cheyenne. They have a great feeling of community here in Pinewood Village. They are thrilled to be one of the finalists for the Beautification Awards because they've been working their tails off remodeling to make Pinewood and Cheyenne a more beautiful place. They really have. We have one more, and I'm not sure if he's here. It's Chef Kent. Is Chef Kent here? No? Okay. Thank you, and welcome to all of our new business partners.
Good afternoon, everyone. So good to see everyone here today on this beautiful Friday here in Wyoming. You know, I was just watching the video and there was Pistol Pete, right? So I think 4 colleges use Pistol Pete as their mascot. What you might not know is that Pistol Pete was a real guy. So a guy, his name is Frank Eaton. So you can go look him up on the internet. And the funny thing is he looks just like the guy that we all use as a mascot. So go look up Pistol Pete. There is one negative about old Pete. So you might have heard the comment hotter than a pistol, or it actually started out hotter than Pete's pistol. So he used to flip coins in the air and shoot them with his pistols as they came out of the air. But the one disturbing thing about the guy is he was born in Connecticut. So the quintessential cowboy that we all look to, that we have mascots about, I know New Mexico, Oklahoma State, UW, he was actually born in Connecticut. So, you know, we'll take them from wherever they come as long as they adhere to our lifestyle and adhere to our values. Glad to see everyone here. Thank you for coming today. We're going to have an important discussion on healthcare. I know it is something that is a retention issue for employees. Healthcare is at the top of all of our minds as we move forward. I'd just like to give you a couple of things that we've been working on. We had a really good summer. Hope you attended many of our events. You know, one of the things we are able to do every year is host some of our military folks as they come in. We were able to host General Cotton, who runs a Global Strike Command, who controls our future for GBSD. And so it was good to have him back in Cheyenne and for him to see what's going on here. You know, there's a lot going on with GBSD that we don't know about, right? So I ran into a guy from Gillette yesterday. His company is building the jigs for solid rocket motors. Already money coming here. There's somebody in Cheyenne that's selling metal to Salt Lake, to the projects that are being built. Our goal for this missile project is not only to strengthen our nation, but also make sure that the Wyoming economy and Cheyenne's economy is boosted because of it, right? We are lucky that we have, good to see you, Governor Gordon. Glad you could join us. We were told you were incognito, so we're letting you play incognito. But we have a great, I didn't think that was that funny. We're glad to have you here today, but we have a great leader that helps us with this. I had a meeting with his staff last week, Erica Legursky. She works on his policy staff for military and has been a great help over time. He's hired a major project director, Jen Thompson, somebody who's familiar with Cheyenne. Man, she's a fast learner. We met with her. We had 45 minutes. We met for an hour and a half and just talked through all the things that we can do. So, Governor, thank you for that and the priority you put on that. We are very grateful, and I know that we're going to get a lot of benefit in Wyoming because of it. So one of the things I'm excited about this one. So one of the things I get to do today is that we have something in the chamber called the Venture Program. So we ask you guys to have interns in your businesses, to reach out to Wyoming kids, to bring them into your businesses, to show them what you do, to give them a good experience so that they will want to stay here. And we do not care whether you hammer nails for a living or you are doing spreadsheets of economic data. We want to keep the best of our kids here. But we can't tell you guys to do that in good conscience, not do it ourselves. So we have done internships in the chamber. We've adjusted it. So we live by the venture program and kind of what we're doing, but we have had an exceptional Wyoming kid in our office all summer, and we're finally getting her to talk, but her work has been great. We're all crazy at the chamber, so it's hard. I get it. It's hard to adjust, but we are very excited. She's getting ready to go off to college. And we just wanted to present her certificate for working on her internship and for you guys to see who she is. A lot of the good work that you have seen out of our organization is because we have had an exceptional kid from Wyoming that has been doing that work. So please give a hand to Sydney O'Brien for all the work she's done. So Sydney, we just want to give you this certificate of achievement and just to tell you thank you for all that you've done. We wish you well in college. And I know we've sucked up so much of your time. You haven't even been able to pack and you leave here pretty quick. But thank you. And we have greatly enjoyed all of your work. And I know you're going to have an exceptional career and an exceptional life. Couple other announcements before I get out of here. One is that you might have noticed that we didn't have a trip to Washington this September. We just felt like with all the elections and stuff going on in the country, we wanted to let that set. So after January 1st and later in the month in January, we're going to reschedule that trip. For those of you who haven't gone, you can start looking now. Usually we've been taking about, last year, I think about 30-ish. Total, but it is a really good visit where we go lobby and advocate for a lot of the things that we need here in Cheyenne. We talk to the U.S. Chamber and go through some economic analysis, and it's always good to see when we walk into the U.S. Chamber, the charter members of that organization and this chamber helped start that organization. I think there was one other one in Wyoming, and interestingly, it was Green River was a charter member of the U.S. Chamber. But anyway, get that on your calendar. We haven't forgotten about it. It will be coming up. October, of course, is a business month, and we will do that with our economic forecast kickoff on the 7th of October, and we'll do that at Blue to help prepare us for the next year and what we have coming. Circle of Champions, which is Dr. Prentice and Dr. Serbrug this year. They will be doing that interview with Dr. Schaefer on the 11th. That is my favorite event that we do of the year, to take folks that have poured their life into our state, into our community, and they sit and talk to us about here's what's been most important to me, and tell us a little bit of their life. So put that on your calendar. Business to Business Expo is also that day, so please put that on your calendar. I guess next we'll do our 50-50. Oh, I'm going to forget something and I don't want to. So we got Boo Ball coming up. So I know we got a couple of volunteers here that want to come visit with us about Boo Ball. So if you would welcome Aldea Bishop and Rhea Parsons. Is it Rhea or Rhea? Rhea Parsons. I got it right the first time. Mark that down. Rhea Parsons to the stage to tell us about Boo Ball for this year.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rhea Parsons, and on behalf of the Leadership Cheyenne 2021-2022 class, we would like to invite you to the annual Boo Ball event that's going to be happening actually right here in this room on October 22nd. The theme this year is Roaring 20s, and so we encourage you to come in your best. And of course, a casino night, so it's going to be a ton of fun. We have what we consider probably to be the best Leadership Cheyenne class so far. So if you are a part of the 2021-22 class, would you please stand up? I'm going to point you out. Awesome. Let's give you a round of applause. As always, we are looking for sponsors for this event. So if you or your business are interested in sponsoring that event, I actually have well, it's the sponsorship contract paper here in my hand. So if you'd like to commit today, come find me. I'm in the back of the room and we'd love to have you be a part of our event. So thank you.
Okay, don't look at me. Have you heard about the Boo Ball presented by King Golf? It's October 22nd from 6 to 11 p.m. Where at you ask? Right here. It's Roaring 20s casino night, so dress as the flapper, gangster, or bootlegger. All proceeds will go to the Leadership Class of 2022 Community Project. We put murals up all over town. Thanks.
Blue Ball is such an important project to raise money for beautification around our community. If you ever doubt it, one year we planted $150,000 worth of trees in this community. So drive by Romero Park, you see all those cottonwoods that are growing and growing. That happened because somebody somewhere volunteered their time, volunteered their money. That's how it happens, folks. And we are grateful and humbled that this community continues to give and give. But I'm going to give something back to you. So free lunch drawing. Desiree Van Kirk. So if you will see my staff, you won the luncheon today. And the half pot. $028,054. I always want, these half pots are always, there's $130 today, right? So they're always good. I always wondered that. I read a stat this week that tells me why. Over 98% of Wyoming businesses are small business, as according to the federal government. So you guys are used to gambling every single day, half pots, and no big deal. Now I'd like to welcome Stephen Fotatis, mid-year chair now, right? He's counting down the days to finish off our program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale, and thank you, Leadership Cheyenne. That was quite entertaining, Aldea. That was it's good. Good work. Yeah, I have it. So Aldea's husband and I actually work together, so I have a nice video to send to her husband. So it'd be good. So for today's panel, we feature some of the most knowledgeable people working in the healthcare industry in our community. They have dealt directly with COVID and how the pandemic has changed healthcare in our country. They have been working towards advancements in how to best tackle healthcare in such an unknown and changing time. Our moderator for today is our very own Tanya Keller, who's the Vice Chair for Economic Development with the Chamber of Commerce. Please help me in welcome Tanya, Diane Gore, President and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming, Tim Thornell, President and CEO of Cheyenne Regional Medical Center, and Eric Boley, President of the Wyoming Association Hospital Association, please.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I guess, almost now. Thanks so much for coming. What a juicy topic we have today, and certainly a topic hard to navigate for most of us. And so I'm really grateful that we have three professionals here that can help us make some sense of some of this and share their opinions. And everyone in this crowd is going to, appreciate the comments, and we would like, definitely honest feedback from you guys, whether you disagree or agree. I think that's what makes us all great. So I'd first like you to go around and introduce yourself. Tell us what you do.
Sure, you bet. Thank you, Tanya. And I am Diane Gore, and I am the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming. I've been in the CEO role for little over 3 years. I was the COO prior to that, and then also the CFO and treasurer for many years.
Good. My name is Tim Thornell, President and CEO at Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. Been here for about 3.5 years. Prior to that, served as a CEO at a hospital in New Mexico for about 8 years.
I can't figure out how to turn this on. I'm Eric Bully, President of the Wyoming Hospital Association. I'm just about to the end of my 8th year. Before that, I was a hospital administrator in Kimmer, Wyoming, and I was there for 20 years. So I've been in the healthcare industry for about 30 years.
Awesome. We'll start out with the first question and we'll start out with you and we'll just go around. So how would you characterize the current state of the healthcare in Wyoming? And giving your answer, please highlight things that are going well and also talk about issues that are concerning.
Sure, thank you. And what I would say in healthcare in Wyoming, we do have a lot of good things going on. We're very blessed to have the providers that we have in the state, and they're willing to arise to any challenges. You talk about COVID, which was something that none of us had ever seen, and all of the providers in Wyoming and others really stepped up to the challenge there, and were able to provide the citizens of Wyoming with what was needed during that time. You also look at, and this is maybe one of those fortunate blessings, maybe that came out of COVID. And I look at telemedicine, and telemedicine is now much more widely available. More and more providers have adopted telemedicine, and it really does allow more access to care. And would you like me to continue with challenges or come back to that?
We'll keep going.
Okay, I'll keep going. But overall, though, I would also characterize the healthcare environment in Wyoming as challenging. It's tough to recruit physicians and nurses to Wyoming. The pandemic exacerbated this. Many nurses left the profession during COVID, and then the cost of traveling nurses is quite substantial. And I really think it's going to take several years for that to work itself through the system as new graduates enter the profession. Also in Wyoming, cost is a significant issue. At Blue Cross Blue Shield, we have access to a lot of data, not only for what we pay on behalf of our members in Wyoming, but also national data for other Blue Cross Blue Shield members across the country. And so through that data, we're able to compare what the cost of care is in Wyoming to the rest of the country. And what I will say is, just on a straight dollar amount, what we pay for our members compared to what is being paid for healthcare across the country, in Wyoming, we pay 40% more. And so when you're already talking big numbers, 40% is quite substantial on top of that. So then we ask ourselves, why is that? Is it because the Wyoming population is older and sicker than the rest of the country? With this data that we have, it also comes with risk scores, which adjusts and accounts for population and demographics and health status of the individuals. So we can take that into account to make the scores more equal. So when we risk adjust those numbers and account for those acuities of those people in Wyoming and across the country, Wyoming actually has a lower risk score than the rest of the country. So that means that in general, Wyoming people are healthier than the rest of the country. And so we would expect healthcare in Wyoming to be less. But when we take these risk scores into account, the cost of healthcare in Wyoming is actually 50% higher than the rest of the country. So then we say to ourselves, well, maybe it's because we're more rural than the rest of the country. And what CMS does is they divide the country, and they do this using zip codes, and they divide it into urban, rural, and super rural. In Wyoming, the only areas that are considered urban are Cheyenne and Casper, and the rest of the state, it isn't even rural, it's considered super rural. So when we look at these, which isn't surprising, but when we look at these risk-adjusted scores then, and take into account this rural or super rural environment. Again, for the entire state, it's 50% higher. For the urban areas, it's 47% higher. And for the super rural areas, it's still 41% higher. So cost in Wyoming is one of our biggest challenges that we're facing.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, thanks. I'll just add on to some of those not so fun facts about healthcare. What we do find is in Wyoming, what's happening certainly on the hospital front is really happening all throughout our country. We're really not any different. I don't know if that makes us feel better or worse, but that's what it is. So Kaufman Hall, they're a great expert in the healthcare consulting world. And they said 2022 is shaping up to be the worst financial year for US hospitals and health systems. You look across the country, Detroit-based Henry Ford Health System in the last half of year lost $74.7 million. Renton, Washington, Providence, which is probably the largest not-for-profit hospital company in the country, last 2 quarters, so 6 months, lost $934 million. Even for-profit companies, HCA lost $32 million last quarter alone. Mass General Brigham and Young, associate affiliate with Harvard, the last 3 months lost $120 million. So you see the trend that we're facing here in healthcare. So it truly is shaping up to be a very, very rough year. The other thing we find is, hospitals are vulnerable. And so you look at, since 2011, we have lost 76 hospitals in this country. They've closed their doors. And all those hospitals are actually targeted in the rural areas, which certainly impacts Wyoming quite a bit. And in fact, 1 in 5 Americans live in rural defined areas. So rural areas are more at risk for losing access to healthcare through hospital closures. And if hospitals themselves aren't closing, we find service lines closing, right? So as hospitals struggle, we find hospital in Florida no longer, this is just from this year, all 3 of these articles, just from this week alone. Hospital in Florida no longer offering emergency services. Cleveland-based healthcare system cutting back on surgical and emergency services. Hospital in Illinois ended their labor and delivery services, no more delivering babies. Hospital in Michigan no longer offers inpatient pediatric services. Hospital in Southern California closes their geriatric psych unit. Another hospital in West Virginia closes their obstetric unit. Hospital in Ohio closed their obstetric unit. You see the list go on. So the 3 prevalent ones are pediatric units closing, ER services closing, and obstetric unit closing. And we're not immune to that here in Wyoming. We've had 2 of our own hospitals on the western side of the state this summer, close their obstetric units. And that makes life tough in those communities, right? So now I have you all as a downer. Let me tell you there are some good things. Wyoming does do some good things. Good things, there was no Wyoming hospital on that list of closure since 2011, right? So that's good. We do a good job of taking care of our own, right? We have done a great job locally here at Cheyenne, but I think throughout the state of hiring, retaining, focusing on physicians and nurses who are from our state. The medical journey to become a physician is a long one. In addition to undergrad, you got to go to 4 years of medical school, and then you got to go to residency that's anywhere from 3 to 7 years beyond that. So a lot of that training has to happen outside of Wyoming, but we're doing a good job bringing back people who grew up in Wyoming. And a great part about that is they want to stay here long term, right? So that's really good. We've been able to hire just in the last couple of months, a new pulmonologist, grew up in Wyoming, right? A new general surgeon grew up in Wyoming, and they'll be starting here in just a couple of months. And we see similar trends throughout the state as well. Our local colleges are doing a good job helping us with more training for nurses. These last 2 cycles of nurses graduating from LCCC, from right here, we hired all but 1 out of each class. right? And found jobs for them at Cheyenne Regional, for which we're very thankful. But we're also recognize when we hire them, other places don't have an opportunity to hire them. But LCCC is actually increasing how many nurses they're going to train. So we're all thankful for that. They're starting a new respiratory therapy program. We're thankful for that. We recognize our needs in our community and we help support that. And last thing I'll leave you with on improvements, and specifically for here in our county, in our community in Laramie County, we've been focusing on at Cheyenne Regional since last four or 5 years, but 4 years in particular, looking at how do we make our county healthier in the broad spectrum. And actually, the University of Wisconsin, in conjunction with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, do a survey every single year and rank the health of our counties in Wyoming. And they do it for a lot of other states too. 4 years ago, Laramie County was ranked in the bottom third. We were like 17th, 18th out of 23 counties. We thought, why? Why are we there? Because we have an awful lot of healthcare services, especially compared to what else is around the state. But it's more than just providing, good acute care services. It's a lot of things we call social determinants of health. It's a lot of things that Diana, the First Lady, just talked about a few minutes ago. Access to food, access to housing. Hard to be healthy in Wyoming in the winter when you don't have heat in your home. Hard to be healthy anywhere in the United States if your house has mold, especially if you have kids, especially if you have kids who have asthma, right? And as a health system, we were reluctant to take on this goal to see us improve. We monitored it very closely, but we recognize most of those dynamics are not things we directly impact. We have nutritionists on staff and they can tell you how to eat healthy, but we're not a grocery store. We don't provide the food, right? We're not in the housing business. But we decided a couple of years ago, we need to make a difference. Our goal is to inspire great health. And there is no one organization that does all of this. And we partner with a lot of groups. And so we thought it would compel us to partner more, and it did. And with that, we went from 19th, and 3 years ago, we were 15th. Last year, we were 10th. This year, we're 5th. We've moved up the ranks, top 5 healthiest counties in the state of Wyoming, which really, and we don't do it alone. It absolutely takes a village. It takes our partnership within our city and our community to make that happen. So I want to thank everybody that we partner with to make a difference. But it does say and tell us in Wyoming, in Cheyenne, in Laramie County, when we work together, we can accomplish great things and we can see better health.
So we picked an easy topic and we'll have this solved here in the next 20 minutes. And I can echo a lot of what's been said. Obviously, telehealth is one of the major advancements that we've seen and continue to see growth in that area through the pandemic. It's a matter of getting people used to having the virtual visits. It's been an issue of broadband and other technology allowing us to be able to use that technology. I think one of the other major accomplishments that I see is I serve on the governor's healthcare task force. We've been meeting for almost 2 years. And a lot of people in this room actually are on that. It's a group of like-minded, interested parties. We've been meeting with his policy advisor for healthcare. And we've been trying to make recommendations and push towards new policy that might help. And this has been a major topic of the governor's too, the cost of healthcare. It's a topic that we talk about as an association all the time and how we drive that down. The other thing that I think has been a real major thing is we've seen communities in our state really supporting their healthcare workers and their healthcare facilities. And I think that's an important thing. And I think that's something we need to see going forward. One of the major challenges we face is outmigration. We see a lot of care leave our state. Like millions and millions and millions of dollars leave our state. One of the reasons our cost of healthcare is so high in our state is because of economies of scale. If we could keep that care in our state, we would actually see, because of volume, we'd actually see a decrease in cost. There are a lot of factors that go into cost of healthcare, and we could talk about all of those. And I think we might get into a little bit of that here as we go along, but it's something that we're aware of. It's something that we constantly work on. We're trying to bring the cost down, but there are factors that weigh into that. And there are high overhead costs, overhead fixed costs that are needed in each of our facilities to be able to meet the needs of the communities. And one of the reasons that we're seeing OB services in our small communities go away, emergency surgery goes away, it's because those overhead fixed costs are just unsustainable with the volumes that we're seeing. And I think this is a trend that we're seeing nationally. We're seeing some of these services cut. as we've seen the battle on oil and gas and coal, we've also seen tax revenue decrease in our state. And that tax revenue has been used to support and sustain services in our small communities. A lot of them have mill levies or their county memorial hospitals. And that is really what keeps them solvent. From Cheyenne's perspective, I'm really proud of what's going on here. I think that Tim and his team have done a great job. I think Cheyenne Regional is in the best shape it's been in a long time. And like I said, I've been in the state a long time. But some of our small rural facilities are really, really struggling right now. Some of them have less than 10 days cash on hand, which is one of the worst indicators you can look at. To be a healthy facility, they expect you to have 150 to 160 days cash on hand. So we really have some of our small critical access hospitals that are struggling. And as Diane said, you know, the frontier nature of our state, our small facilities are expected to be everything to everyone in those communities. And they provide services that 90% of them are lost leaders and 10% of those make money for them. And then when we take a look at the actual cost of healthcare, we have, it's called cost shifting, but we have a lot of underpaid or no payments in our communities. And so the insurance market ends up making up a big deal of the difference there to keep those facilities sustainable. That's something also that we've been trying to focus on, is how do we decrease the number of underinsured or uninsured so that they at least have coverage. And so we start seeing some payments for those services. Anyway, I know we've got a lot of other important topics, so I'll shut up now, and I'm sure I'll get a chance to talk some more later.
Well, you just gave me a great segue though into the next question. Cost. Cost of healthcare is a major concern for businesses in our chamber. Can you tell us what is driving these costs and increases?
Sure. I think and there are a number of reasons, and in other industries, it seems there are functioning market support forces that work to align supply and demand and create competition, and therefore can produce low cost, high quality types of services that can work in healthcare. If you think about, for example, LASIK surgery or cosmetic surgery, and these are items that aren't generally covered by insurance, these are services to where prices have gone down. The quality is promoted by the provider. The price is transparent. The consumer knows what they're getting. And if they don't like the price or the quality, they can go elsewhere. But generally speaking, in healthcare, the price is unknown or not important to the person at the point they're receiving the care. Quality can be challenging to gauge. And even knowing if the individual is getting the right service is sometimes difficult. So that's your starting point. And that's healthcare, I think, across the country. On top of that, you've got other market forces such as you have venture capital and private equity companies that are buying up healthcare delivery assets. For example, ambulance providers, labs, ER physicians, even hospitals. And so that, again, that creates a misalignment. In Wyoming, and to kind of lead off on what Eric and Tim were saying as well, we do it. Choice and competition is limited. And there's no question we have a smaller population over which to spread those fixed costs that Eric talked about. And that's a real challenge. And also to Eric's point, when he talked about 90% of these services are loss leaders and 10% are maybe the money makers, how do we solve for that? And this is an extreme example, but it is a real true example. Take a knee replacement. There is a small hospital in super rural Wyoming to where the cost of a knee replacement is 5 to 6 times more expensive than it would be in a surgery center. So we could say, member, come get your knee replaced at this surgery center, and we will buy you a nice Toyota Corolla to drive home in, and we will still be better off. But what if that hospital needs to perform a certain number of those knee replacements each year to remain viable? And those are the types of conversations that we need to have. Maybe we ought to be paying more for those services that we want to be performed in those communities, appendectomies and those types of things. But again, that's just part of the difficult conversations that need to take place. Also, to both Eric's and Tim's point, citizens want the full suite of services available locally, but the cost of that does increase the cost for everyone. We also see more specialty providers rather than a focus on primary care. Specialty medicine is generally more expensive. The cost of prescription drugs, I think we've all heard about that. There are new specialty medications being developed all of the time. Cell and gene therapy medications that cost between $2 and $3 million. We have a number of members that are on medications that cost between $2 and $3 million on an annual basis. And those costs have to be spread out among everyone. So that also drives the cost. And there are other factors as well. Some of what we've talked about, recruitment and retention of labor, the social determinants of health, the housing and food insecurity, those really do play a key role, which is why we support those initiatives such as Wyoming Hunger Initiative and some Habitat for Humanity programs as well, because all of those play a role in members' health. Government laws and regulation can also increase costs. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it does not work well. The Consolidated Appropriations Act, which was passed in late 2020, had a number of healthcare provisions in there, all of which add to the expense of administering healthcare in the state and across the country. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so on the cost, I'll mention two things. So one, Diane did a great job touching on, and really healthcare is an ecosystem, right? We are significantly interdependent upon one another for everything that we do. And as you shift things around, it has quite a bit of disturbing long-term significant impacts. And so again, hospitals in particular providing a breadth of services. If you start to extract one or two of their service lines that are profitable, and as you look at ambulatory surgery centers that come in, or someone wants to start a new imaging center and say, hey, we can do it for less. And yes, they can. But now that erodes what little margin that we have, and all of our other services subsequently will either one, go away, or two, become more expensive. So we got to figure out collectively, how do we work this together? It cannot be done piecemeal. And the second thing, I'll just give you some real examples of the cost and what we're experiencing in healthcare. I'll give you our numbers at Cheyenne Regional, but it's what everyone's experiencing all across the country. I was at a conference just a couple of months ago and talked to hospitals, Yale, New Haven in Connecticut, and Stanford in California, and Baylor Scott and White in Texas, and exact same story they have that we do. And so for this year, looking at those that had negative margins or razor thin margins, I guess the good news is for Cheyenne Regional, we had a positive margin this year, but our margin was 0.3%. 0.3. We're on the lucky side too, right? But that's not sustainable. And Diane touched on it in inflation. Inflation is impacting healthcare, and I would suggest impacting us a little bit more than a lot of other industries. Our costs for supplies are skyrocketing. You look at pharmaceuticals, drugs, one, costs are going up, but two, supply shortage. Today, there are 264 drugs that we are in short supply of at our hospital. We don't have enough of them. We can't get them. So either the cost goes up or we don't have them. We are fortunate at Cheyenne Regional in the pharmacy area because we have a lot of great pharmacists. So lidocaine, for example, not too long, shortage of lidocaine. It's anesthetic. It kind of numbs the skin around you're doing some work there. It numbs the skin. We have pharmacists that are on staff that can take all sorts of different doses. We can buy it and they can distill it down to exactly what our physicians need. A lot of hospitals don't have pharmacists that can do that, don't have the time to do that. So we're very fortunate to be able to be in that position. But really what drives the cost of healthcare so much is labor. Most of what we do is labor, right? We have lots of fancy equipment. I can rattle off $1 million pieces of equipment that we have, but at the end of the day, our budget revolves around labor. Traditionally, we're sitting at around 51, 52% of our total budget is labor cost. This past fiscal year that just ended, 59.6% of all of our budget was labor cost. And as we alluded to already, contract labor, as nurses just left healthcare and didn't work in healthcare, as nurses left to go work in other parts of the country to do what we call contract labor or agency staff, because they got paid a lot. I mean, 3-4 times what they normally make. So hard to blame them, but they were paying a lot to go somewhere else. So we had to bring in other people to do that. Our cost last fiscal year, $26 million on contract labor alone, 15.1% of our budget. Not sustainable. Right. So again, we're trying to devote a lot of time, attention, and resources into retaining staff, hiring the right staff. Again, why we partner with LCCC, why we hired every single nurse we could from them. We also increased salaries for retention purposes for our critical staff, largely nurses, and that annualized about $8.5 million. And that cost is never going away. Right, but it's better than the 26 million. So we hope it's a wise investment for our local community, our local staff to keep us going. I'll stop there.
Okie dokie. I'll just build off of this contract labor thing just briefly. Without the governor's help, actually, with getting CARES funding out, we would have lost some of our facilities. We were able to get some CARES funding to help pay for that contract staffing, and it didn't cover all of it. Without that funding, I think we would have seen some of our hospitals and nursing homes fail in the state. I think one of the interesting things that we haven't touched on is hospitals are one of the weirdest industries or businesses you'll ever see. In most businesses, you go in and you pay for the services before you leave. With healthcare, you go in and you receive the services, whether or not you have the ability to pay. And then later on, you get billed and you may or may not pay your bill. One of the reasons we see such high costs in our state, we actually see a lot of under and uninsured to the tune of $120 to $125 million a year. And that's just the cost of delivering care across our state. And it's something we've been trying to combat and trying to help with. But we obviously have a lot of federal regulations that really weigh heavily on us, and CMS, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicaid Services, are the 1,000-pound gorilla that we have to adhere to. Diane touched on some of these federal programs that we've been required to do. And one of them that's really driven the cost of healthcare up, and I don't really think we've seen a bang for our buck, it was called the High Tech Act. It was passed during Obama's administration. But every hospital, every doctor in the country was required to go on an electronic health record. And they spent millions of dollars so that you could go in and see your doctor and he could spend most of his time typing information in the computer instead of treating what was making you sick. And they used a stick and a string, or a carrot and a carrot on a stick. And so you had the carrot. You could adhere and meet meaningful use and put in an electronic health record, and they would give you some money to help pay for that. Or they'd use the stick and beat you with it, and you would lose 2% on your reimbursement from Medicare every year for 4 years. And so most of the doctors, most of the hospitals complied with that. But then our electronic health record companies got wise and they decided we need to change the platform. And so they turned around and they made changes to electronic health records. So we had to reinvest in it. So the money that came from the federal government to pay for the original electronic healthcare, then went back to the vendors to pay for the new platform. And that just continues to skyrocket the cost of health. And I really don't think we're seeing major improvements from the use of electronic health records. The other thing Diane touched on, and I think it's interesting, early on, we used to have family practice doctors that did everything in our facilities. They'd take call in the emergency room. They'd take care of patients in the clinic. They deliver babies. We've seen a big shift. There's specialty and subspecialties now where we have internists, we have hospitalists that take care of the patient once they're in the hospital. Family practice doctors don't do that anymore. We're seeing a decrease in the number of family practice doctors. We're seeing an increase in the specialties, and each of those increases the cost of the healthcare. The cost now to recruit providers into our communities, it's skyrocketing too. It takes the right person to want to live in a frontier community and deliver healthcare. And it's even harder to recruit the wife that wants all of the, or the husband that wants all the amenities that big cities do. So we end up paying more in our state for our doctors, for all of our specialists. And so all of these things add to the cost of healthcare. But I do think we're going to talk about ways that we might be able to drive down the cost of healthcare to you as employers.
Let me give just one stat just to kind of put some context to what Eric just said on our obligation as a health system that we're required, to take care of people that come through our doors. And what does that mean? So this last fiscal year, in 12 months' time, Cheyenne Regional alone wrote off $52 million in charity and bad debt care. That's a lot. And we're not the only one. Every hospital throughout the state's doing a similar thing.
Absolutely. Tim, we'll come to you for this question and switch up the route here. We have a lot of businesses in this room. What would you advise business to do to mitigate rising healthcare costs?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts there. One, I think we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but there's a lot of fixed costs in healthcare, right? To have an emergency room available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every minute of every day, it's expensive, and you don't know who's going to come in, how many people are going to come in. Labor and delivery, obstetrics. This is why some are closing throughout the state. You have to be available every second of the day. And some of these places that close are doing maybe 60 deliveries a year. And to put that in context, we do over 100 a month, right? So hard to cover all your fixed costs. So really, to the extent we can, and we talk about this in Wyoming anyway, is buy local. To the extent you can receive healthcare services in your community and resist going across the state lines in particular, it is helpful. It helps reduce and cover that overhead that we have to incur no matter what. But the other thing I want to really touch on and what you can do, particularly as employers, if you look, there's lots of ways to slice and dice the cost of healthcare. Cost of healthcare, we've now broached 20% of the GDP, the gross domestic product. We are several $1 trillion. $2.5 trillion, almost 60% of healthcare costs can be tied back to what we call chronic conditions. These are long-term conditions people have. This could be diabetes. This could be heart failure, congestive heart failure, other conditions that you live with, right? There's not necessarily a cure. You got to live with them. And we spend, again, and as a nation, over $2.5 trillion on those conditions. So to the extent we can mitigate that, to the extent we can have wellness programs to really keep those chronic conditions in check, we can help drive down the cost of healthcare, not just nationally, but locally. So then it goes back to businesses. What can businesses do? A lot of you that provide healthcare services, whether you fund your own plan or self-insured, or you go through a commercial plan with the Blue Cross Blue Shield or someone else, we won't mention any of your competitors' names. Create a wellness program, right? Create a wellness program and really, truly incentivize your employees to do the right thing, right? If they have diabetes, keep their A1C low, right? If they have heart conditions, stay on the medication they need to stay on. That is so much less expensive than treating those conditions that are gone unchecked. And they're, again, $2.5 trillion we can address, not all of it, but we can make a big dent in that. And it starts with employers being there and an advocate for your employees to help encourage a wellness program to have them do that.
Okay, I'll just add a couple of things. I certainly agree with everything that Tim said, but really encourage your employees to understand their insurance program, encourage them to use those preventive benefits, establish a primary care provider. That's a really big deal, is to have that relationship with your primary care provider. Also recognize that mental health is also an important point to overall health. And this is an area that in the past has tended to be overlooked, but is now fortunately starting to get more attention to it. Encourage your employees to talk to their providers about the care that they are receiving. Is it the right care? Don't necessarily pay attention to the ads that you see on TV. Sometimes what you see there are the more expensive treatments, and there are quite often less expensive treatments that produce the same results. So ask questions to your provider, use those preventive benefits.
All right, we will go to question number 4. Part of dealing with costs has circled around wellness in recent years. Most businesses are a little confused about what their role is regarding wellness and employees. Describe what role you think business should play in wellness and describe how this approach is a good business decision. You may disagree with this, and if you do, please tell us why. Tim?
Right. Well, we started to touch on this and I suggested, wellness programs really can make a difference. What we find is employers who initiate a wellness program, the ROI is about a year, year and a half, no more than 2 years. And you'll actually start to see savings, especially if you have a self-funded program. And so what does it look like? You want to incentivize your employees to do the right thing. We do this at our hospital, for our employees, because we're a consumer of healthcare as well, just like everyone else. And so we monitor and encourage our employees. You need to know your health status, right? So if you'll actually get a reduction in your monthly premium, how much you personally pay if you do lab test every year. So you know if you're diabetic or not. So you know where your triglycerides are at, other things. And you can't manage things if you don't know about it. So we'll actually financially incentivize you to know your health status and to do the right things, stay on the right medications. So we may actually encourage and make certain medications cheap or even free because we know that if we don't, the consequences of the cost of that are just astronomical. So the great thing about a wellness program is it's very scalable. So as a business, you can decide, hey, how much do we want to incentivize our employees to participate in our wellness program? What does it look like? Either just encouraging good habits, behavioral health, as Dan mentioned, a huge part of it, wellness, taking your vacation time so you have a reprieve, right? And not just cashing it out. Up to and including looking at your own workforce population, saying, hey, what's driving up our healthcare costs, and maybe targeting some very specific things. And again, just for, example, if it is chronic heart failure, maybe you're going to really subsidize medication associated with that. So everybody really does take it and you'll see your costs go down over time.
Dan? And I'll just add to what Tim said. Productivity is critical to any business. And in order to have a productive workforce, you need a healthy workforce. And this includes both physical. And again, I'm going to go back to the mental health and that national data that I talked about earlier, when I said that Wyoming is healthier than the rest of the country in total, that is true. But when it comes to mental health and substance abuse disorders, Wyoming is actually less healthy than the rest of the country. So that is a real problem now, and employers need to recognize that and encourage their employees to be able to access the services that are available. Whole person health is kind of a new concept, but it's a very important concept. And it really goes back to some of the items that Tim was referring to that they're doing. We did something similar. We recently launched a new product called a new 360 that's available at no cost to all of our members. And it's powered through WebMD. But really what that does is it focuses on that whole person health. And I think that's critical for businesses and for employees to really be able to take care of themselves. And ultimately, that's what's needed to have that productive workforce.
I would just add a couple of quick things. We need to understand our plans that we have for our employees. And I think Tim touched on this, but we need to have our employees utilize the services. If preventative screening is available, we need to have our employees get out, have their mammographies, have their colonoscopies done. I think another thing, especially for large employers, you could have health fairs in your organization and make sure that those blood draws are being done, give them the opportunity to find out if they are pre-diabetic. And that way we get ahead of these things and it actually helps lower the cost of care. I think one of the big things that, going back a couple questions, the mental and behavioral health issues in our state right now are staggering. And one of the big problems we have in our state is we're understaffed when it comes to these issues. We don't have enough specialists. We don't have enough resources there. And I think it's one of the things that's really driving a lot of our healthcare costs. So if you have plans for your employees, we need to make sure they're utilizing those things. and getting the help they can as early as possible. Anything we can do to get ahead of the curve on any of these chronic illnesses or diseases, the better off we're going to be and the less it's going to cost us.
Thank you. One last question before we just go to finishing comments. Legislation can have a major impact on the cost and quality of healthcare. Currently, the pharmacy benefit manager issue is an example of this impact. The chamber watches this issue and other issues related to the healthcare carefully. What can you tell us about the PBM issue and what other governmental pitfalls do you think is important for us to watch? Diane?
Sure, I'll take this one. A regulatory framework can be beneficial, but it needs to be done correctly or there can be unintended consequences. It's important to understand legislation that is working its way through the process, or oftentimes there can be unwittingly increases in healthcare costs. So that's why it's important to talk to your legislators, not just about healthcare legislation, but about any legislation. So often it seems legislation can be driven by a small group of individuals or a special interest group that oftentimes can have big impacts to employers. And so that's why it's important for employers to pay attention to this type of situation. And a perfect example of this was Senate File 36, which was the PBM legislation. And it was brought forward by pharmacists with a long list of wants that would have increased the costs of prescriptions and other aspects of a business's health plan. The bill was aimed at pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, and PBMs are companies that insurers utilize to help manage the high costs of prescription drugs and also the appropriate usage of prescription drugs. And PBMs are by far not the only entity in the prescription drug supply chain, but yet at this point, they're the best answer that we have to help offset the high costs of drugs that are set by the manufacturers. So of this legislation, the pharmacists, the independent pharmacists were real champions of this legislation, but most of it was brought forward by a chain pharmacist. And the legislation that was proposed had very little benefit alone to just the independent pharmacists. And to give you an idea of the dollar magnitude, just for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming members, it would have cost close to $50 million a year for this legislation. So ultimately, the legislation was stopped in the House, but the conversations now in the interim are continuing among the stakeholders in the industry to see if the issues can be addressed without significant economic impacts. And what it comes down to is the pharmacists would like to be paid more, and they want to use state law to govern what employers can and cannot do in their health plan in order to manage the costs of drugs. So stay tuned. There's definitely more to come.
Okay, well, my comments will be brief. I think Diane did a great job describing the PBM, the pharmacy benefit manager, position. So I'll just give you a general cautionary tale, and that is, when it comes to healthcare, particularly as we look at the quality side of things, there's the cost of finance, how we finance it. Yes, government's needs to be involved. On the quality side, my cautionary tale is to resist a lot of overregulation in that sector. Because in healthcare, we move fast. We have a lot of advances going on. So I think back to a different state I was in several years ago, and they passed a law that said, this is about 10 years ago, for OB patients have a baby, they had a bad outcome in this state and they attributed it to being discharged too soon. So the new law said, you cannot leave the hospital in less than 48 hours. Can't do it. I mean, it took a ton of paperwork to get out. And they made it really hard. And at the time that may have made some sense, but it didn't take, anybody with too much foresight to look ahead and say, we advanced so much in healthcare. This is not going to be where we're at today, in the future. And right now, a lot of our deliveries, normal deliveries that go well, mom and baby get to go home within about 24 hours. They're happy to do so. And if you still have that law in the books, you're now impeding mom getting home. You're now driving up costs. It just doesn't work. So again, there is a role for government in all this, in all of healthcare, but a cautionary tale to not over-regulate, especially on the quality side, because healthcare does a pretty good job self-regulating and finding the right spot over time, because we all want to do the right thing.
Wow, this is good stuff, right, you guys? So juicy. All right, well, we've had a great conversation today. Would any of you like to close with a final comment or word of advice?
Sure, I'll just make a couple comments and certainly appreciate being here today and having the opportunity to have this conversation. I think these types of conversations that are happening today are very important. The conversations that are happening with the governor's task force are also important. But the healthcare delivery system and the healthcare financing system have to figure out a way to come together and create solutions to make healthcare sustainable. If we don't figure out how to do it, the federal government will step in and do it for us. So we at Blue Cross Blue Shield, we are certainly committed to working with providers, legislators, community partners to have that education and have the conversations and work on ways to where we can keep healthcare sustainable in Wyoming. There are things that we can do. We can change how we pay for services. We can pay for value over volume. We can, again, we talked about, several of us talked, or all of us, I think, talked about how we can't have all the services in all the communities all the time at a low cost. So how do we address those priorities? But again, it's going to take conversations like what we're having today in order to make progress and keep the discussions moving forward.
Yeah, thanks. Healthcare is just a tough subject. It's tough. It's complicated. As we described, there's lots of nuances to it. But it takes us together to make a big difference. So, my request, my call to action, if you will, there's some things that we are not gonna be able to solve in healthcare on the local front, right? It's gonna take a national scene to do that. And it's important for us to have our voice in that national scene and make our voice heard and be participatory in it. But I would also like to think that we can put a little more of our effort into what we can manage locally, because there are some things that we can do here locally in our state, in our communities. And again, I'll just reiterate what we talked about: preventative health care, primary care, wellness programs. As employers, you play a role in that. And really encouraging people, if they can take time off to get their colonoscopy, to get their mammogram, that makes a big difference in the long run. So if we can focus our time and attention on things that we can make a difference of here locally, we'll see a little bit progress a little bit faster.
Now I'm the thorn on the end of the roses here. I would just say that I'm honored and blessed to represent the hospitals in the state. And I don't represent the building that they're in, I represent the teams. And who would have imagined 3 years ago what our country would have gone through and what healthcare would have gone through? I'm honored with the work that's been done by the healthcare professionals and the sacrifices that have been made on all of our behalfs. They put their own lives at risk to help serve all of us. And so I'm grateful. And in that vein, I would ask that we support our local healthcare providers. I think if we really want to drive down the cost of healthcare, we've got to use the healthcare in our communities. We've got to create economies of scale. We've got to support, just like we need to support our local businesses, we need to support our local healthcare providers. We get it. The WHA board, the hospital CEOs, their boards talk about this topic all the time. And we are constantly trying to find ways to provide better quality care at a lower price, but it's not easy. As you can see, we've spent 40 minutes together and we haven't even scratched the surface. This is a very complex issue. And then you throw in the rules and regulations of the federal government, it gets even more complicated, but we are working on this. We ask you to work with us, but also to support us. And with that, I'm grateful to have been here today. Thank you.
You guys, thank you so much. I'm pretty sure in the last 3 years, there's not been a more volatile industry than what you guys are doing. And so we all want to thank you so much for your leadership roles in our community and our state. Thank you. And Stephen Fotatis will come up and close us out here.
Well, thank you for everyone for being here. We'd certainly like to give a big thank you to Diane, Tim, and Eric, and Tanya for talking through that tough subject of healthcare. I do want to mention before you guys leave that if you're on the panel, please hang out for a little bit so we can get a photo. But thank you guys for being here. We would like to also extend a gracious welcoming for next month, which is Business Month, and we're calling the Circle of Champions Game Day. So come join us on game day and tailgate for business. Get your booths now if you don't have an opportunity. If you haven't had an opportunity, there is some space left available, but it is going fast. Just note that. So buy it quick.